ADHD is a condition that's just full of paradoxes. It's so often misunderstood because it's packed with these wild contradictions, where you can have this immense, daily struggle living right alongside some really incredible talent. To really get it, you have to look at both sides of the coin.
So, let's start with a little bit of a puzzle. What on earth could possibly connect one of the most decorated athletes in history with the guy who basically put a computer on every desk in the world? On one side, you have Simone Biles, who is just a complete force of nature in gymnastics. And on the other, you've got Bill Gates, the visionary who completely reshaped modern technology. I mean, both of them reached the absolute pinnacle of their fields through this intense focus and just relentless innovation.
And here's the surprising link. The thing that ties them together, they both have ADHD. And what's fascinating is they aren't just successful despite it. In some pretty key ways, their unique brain wiring might have actually helped them get to where they are. And that is the central paradox we're going to dive into.
Now, things get really interesting when you put their massive achievements right next to the clinical definition. Wikipedia calls adult ADHD a neurodevelopmental disorder with impairing symptoms that affect things like planning and impulse control. So the big question is, how can a condition that is defined by impairment be linked with such incredibly high achievement? To really wrap our heads around this, we need to look at how the ADHD brain actually works. Think of it less like a broken operating system and more like a completely different one that was maybe designed for a whole different set of tasks. The key difference, really, is in something called executive function. This is basically your brain's CEO. It's the part that's planning, organizing, and deciding what to do next. In an ADHD brain, that management system just works differently, which can be a huge challenge, but also, surprisingly, a strength.
And man, this quote from a Reddit user just captures the frustrating reality of it all so perfectly. The intention is there, the desire is there, but that bridge between wanting to do the thing and actually doing it can feel absolutely impossible to cross. In a nutshell, that's executive dysfunction.
This is tied directly to another core idea, time blindness. See, for a lot of people with ADHD, time isn't this smooth flowing river. It's more binary. Something is either happening right now, or it's often this vague, undefined future called not now. Deadlines don't feel real at all until they are suddenly, terrifyingly, now.
And this is the result. This user absolutely nails that experience of procrastinating for days, followed by this heroic caffeine-fueled sprint to the finish line. That intense sense of urgency is often the only thing that can finally kick that executive function system into high gear.
But look, ADHD isn't just about focus and time. It's also deeply emotional. Emotional dysregulation means that feelings can be incredibly intense, both the good ones and the bad ones. So frustration can feel like pure rage, and excitement can be completely overwhelming. It's a really key part of the whole experience that often gets overlooked.
Okay, so with this totally different operating system, how do these traits actually play out day to day? Well, this brings us right to the heart of this idea of ADHD as a two-sided coin. Almost every single challenging trait has a corresponding and sometimes really powerful flip side.
Let's take hyperfocus. On one hand, it's this amazing ability to get into a state of deep, intense concentration, where you just block out everything else. But the curse of it is that this focus is often involuntary. You can't always control what you focus on, and maybe more importantly, when to stop.
In the right situation, like a crisis, this can be an incredible asset. This person from an ADD survey found that when the pandemic hit, their ability to just absorb tons of information and act decisively was a massive advantage, while everyone else was still trying to process what was going on.
But here's the other side of that coin. The exact same intense focus that can solve a crisis can also lead you to playing a video game for 14 hours straight, totally forgetting to eat or sleep. It's like an all-or-nothing switch, and you don't always get to control the toggle.
All right, let's talk about the emotional side again, because this is a big one. Rejection-sensitive dysphoria, or RSD, is this extreme emotional pain that comes from perceived criticism or rejection. And it's not just feeling bad. It's an intense, overwhelming wound that can feel almost physical, and it can be triggered by really minor things. And just understanding that this is a real thing can be life-changing, even for super high achievers. This story from The Independent is so powerful. For this professional woman, learning about RSD explained decades of feeling like an imposter, where a single tiny complaint could completely erase all of her successes in her own mind. It was the missing piece of the puzzle. Okay, so how does this whole two-sided coin thing play out in the workplace, especially when we're talking about leadership roles? This is where that paradox gets incredibly clear.
A leader with ADHD can be this incredible visionary, just full of energy, amazing creative ideas, and totally calm in a crisis. But that exact same leader might really struggle with the day-to-day admin tasks, forget meetings, and maybe burn out their team with a constant flood of new, unfinished ideas.
So, what's the solution then? Well, as one Reddit user pointed out, the key is often collaboration. When you pair an ADHD leader with a partner who can handle the details and the execution, that leader is freed up to do what they do best: innovate, motivate, and see that big picture nobody else can.
So, look, this isn't a story about inevitable struggle. It's really about understanding the operating system and then building the right support structure around it. The goal is to tip the scales, to maximize those incredible strengths while finding ways to manage the challenges.
The path forward really comes down to 3 key steps. First, getting a proper diagnosis from a clinician is absolutely crucial, and research shows that for a lot of adults, stimulant medications are highly effective. Second, putting simple workplace accommodations in place can make a world of difference. And third, it's about consciously playing to those unique strengths, things like creativity, pattern spotting, and problem solving.
And what's really interesting here is just how straightforward these accommodations are. We are not talking about a complete overhaul of the office. According to sources like CADAC and UNICEF, we're talking about things like noise-canceling headphones, maybe a supervisor helping to prioritize tasks, or flexible start times. These are simple things that can be absolute game changers.
And this isn't just about helping one employee. As this chart from UNICEF makes clear, creating a workplace that actually embraces neurodiversity makes the entire organization better. It brings in new ways of thinking, it boosts creativity, and it fosters a much more inclusive and innovative culture for literally everyone.
So, we end up right about where we began, with that paradox. Is ADHD a bug in the system, a disorder that needs to be fixed, or is it maybe a feature, a different kind of cognitive toolkit that, yeah, it's challenging in our rigid, structured world, but it might be perfectly designed for a more dynamic, creative, and crisis-driven one? The truth is, the answer is probably both. And understanding that duality, well, that's the key.